almost 200 drafted between October 1983 and August 1985. Ray had written poetry and fiction in tandem beginning in 1957. This collection, which spans more than 30 years, allows us to see that his poetry was not something he wrote between stories. Rather, it was the spiritual current out of which he moved to write the short stories for which, after his death, he would be called by the Guardian newspaper, London, America's Chekhov. Now that the entirety of his poetry has been collected, its full mass and density can at last be appreciated. It is said of Lao Tzu, the great Chinese author of the Tao Te Ching, that people became attached to his style because it had a gem-like lucidity, was radiant with humor and grace and large-heartedness and deep wisdom. Stephen Mitchell. In looking for a way to characterize what endears Ray's poems to me, these remarks seem appropriate. With poetry we come to love, and with Ray's in particular, at some point we surrender, and the consciousness of the speaker in the poems is taken into the bloodstream to be recirculated through our lives. We are grateful when a poet gives us new ways of thinking and feeling on trampled ground, and for radiance itself as that new way. What we also find in these poems is an extraordinary sensibility that stays approachable, even companionable. Ray's presence in the poems, as with the man himself in life, continually disarms through some paradoxical capacity both for knowing and innocence. His self-humor steadily redeems him, along with his amazement and curiosity about the complexities of human life and its connection to animal life. I think of a moment in Prosser when he wants to find out what geese like about green wheat. He writes, "I ate some of it once, too, to see." As in his fiction, he demonstrates often that he knows how to pace himself, and knows, too, with Isak Bibel, that a period in the right place can stop the heart. Geese love this shattered wheat also. They will die for it. I recall a commentary on the life and work of Emily Dickinson, in which Dickinson's poems were described as having arrived so directly out of the necessities of the soul that they violated even the notion of poetry as a formed artifact of language. They were, instead, the soul incarnate in its most vital appearance. The meaning was perhaps that language and the poet's nature were so in accord that the interlocutor of voice was wholly absorbed by what it was saying. In a similar way, Ray's artlessness burned so fiercely it consumed all traces of process. Once in a while we get a writer like this, a comet without a tail, yet whose arrival and impact are undeniable. Anyone who has ever felt befriended by a poem at a crucial moment will recognize the place from which I prefer to regard this lifetime in poetry. For 10 years I was Ray's companion and literary collaborator, and finally his wife. I saw the poems in draft and, from Fires onward, had the great pleasure of arranging them in books. Because of this, I experienced the poems as intimates, sojourners, the sinew of a shared life, and this intimacy embraces even those poems written before we met in 1977. Often in revised versions, they form an integral part of the story. Since this book is essentially the tracing of a passage from one shore to another, inception is as important as arrival. I am stricken to the core by an early poem, Morning, Thinking of Empire, where a mundane act becomes the chilling image for a marriage's inevitable interior dissolution. I coolly cracked the egg of a fine leghorn chicken. The moment seems unsurvivable.